It sounds like the White Sox are interested in swapping struggling players with the Mets. Let's discuss the latest Luis Robert Jr. trade rumor that dropped over the weekend on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platforms. USA Today's Bob Nightengale is reporting that the White Sox want third baseman Mark Vientos back from the New York Mets in a deal involving Luis Robert Jr. The Athletic's Patrick Mooney has the Cubs interested in pitcher Adrian Hauser. Let's discuss why the White Sox would want to exchange struggling players for each other and the rationale the Cubs have for wanting Hauser. Then the White Sox keep asking guys to play out of position. Let's discuss how it costs them against the Cubs, why it's frustrating the White Sox just can't implement a simple solution. And finally, it's Monday. Let's do a minor league report. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, so Mark Vientos had a promising season last year. 27 home runs, a .516 slugging percentage, 133 WRC plus, and a 2.9 F4. And then he has fallen on the struggle bus. Sounds sort of like Luis Robert Jr. after his breakout 2023 season. And I love SoxMachine.com's Josh Nelson's response to USA Today's Bob Nightengale's report about who the White Sox want back for LRJ. And this is what he tweets out. This is at SoxMachine_Josh. This trade idea is interesting between the White Sox and Mets. It's our guy who can be really good but struggle this year for your struggling player. Vientos is pre-arb via Spot Track News or Spot Track News. And then he screen grabs what Nightengale wrote. For those watching on YouTube, I have the tweet up. The Chicago White Sox want third baseman Mark Vientos from the New York Mets in any deal for Luis Robert Jr., who has a .983 OPS in 11 July games. Now, the White Sox probably have their economic reasons for Vientos, as he is 25 and he won't be ARB eligible until 2027. So basically, you're trading for a cheaper infielding version, a little bit younger than Luis Robert Jr. Now, the Cubs also have their economic reasons for trading for Adrian Houser. You know, they got a firsthand scout when he shackled them for just 3 runs on Friday in the only game the White Sox played well during this series. And I'm fine with the Sox trading Houser to the Cubs. I just keep advocating, bundle him with, say, Steven Wilson, so the return is a bit better. Mike Tauchman, bundle those guys. Get the best possible return you can. Don't try to trade Adrian Houser on his own. But I want to get into Vientos first and why the heck the Sox want him, and then let's go over what Mooney said about Houser to the Cubs. All right, so with Vientos, the only thing that I can think that makes him attractive is the club control and the need for power, as he had 27 home runs last year. Plus, the organization must think they can also fix something in his swing, much like they did with Miguel Vargas, because he doesn't fit the profile that they've been acquiring. This is Brett Hafner's tweet at Halfball7. He's of SoxOn35th.com. This is what he tweets in response to Josh Nelson. I'm really interested by this one. Vientos does not fit the profile of Getz acquisitions thus far, but I wonder if they see some bright spots with their internal models. First half 2024 was a great offensive profile, 291, 347, 549 slash line, but he's never profiled well defensively. And, kind of what Getz has been acquiring lately is, guys that get on base with a decent glove. And Vientos' career walk percentage is 6.6, well below the ideal 10 target that you're looking for. And he has a career 292 on-base percentage, although he had an on-base percentage of 320 last year. Obviously still not great, not near the great number of 340, 360 that you're looking for, or even the outstanding 380 to 400. Although that 320 would have put him in the top 3 last year for the 2024 White Sox. Another figurative dollar in mentioning the 2024 White Sox. But he is a terrible, terrible defensive third baseman. He's a -8 defensive runs saved this year. -6 DRS last year. -7 outs above average this year. -6 last year. Although, for those that are saying that, hey, we need a first baseman, and I'll get to in the next segment about asking players to play out of position, he has played a little first base, and that's actually where he's been decent. Has 2 career defensive runs saved there in 95 career innings. So maybe you move him to first full time instead of Vargas if you're able to convince the Mets to say, yeah, we'll give up Vientos. We'll basically swap struggles because you can fit both of them in the infield. For those that are saying, well, we already got a bunch of third basemen. We're asking Caleb Montgomery to play third base, which I'll get to in the next segment. Well, you have one of them play first. You have Vargas, or Vientos play third. Caleb Montgomery at short, Chase Mydroth at second, Lenine Sosa and Andrew Benintendi, they split time at DH. That's how you solve the problem. Although on the flip side, now you definitely can't have Kyle Teal and Edgar Carroll in the lineup together that everybody's been clamoring and hoping for. I know the Mets, they don't want this deal. Head over to Locked On Mets, at Locked On Mets on YouTube, for example, and host Ryan Finkelstein. He has a short going up. However, he would only give up Vientos if there's a better package. He's saying you got to put, probably a reliever involved. And I definitely think you're going to have to pay down a lot of Luis Robert Jr.'s salary, even though, I could see Jerry Reinsdorf being like, telling Chris Getz, tell Steve, Steve Cohen, he's got plenty of money to cover this salary. And I get the Mets' perspective. As Luis Robert Jr. missed the first 2 games of the Cubs series with adductor soreness, he also took a 101-mile-per-hour pitch off his arm. X-rays were negative. But the injury risk is obviously there. The underperformance is there. The, whatever's left on is $15 million. Plus, you're going to have to pay him probably $2 million to go away. And again, that's another reason why you trade him, folks, as I discussed on Friday's episode. And for those that are saying, oh, man, I hope this isn't a straight-up swap of struggling players, I probably would be with you, especially if you're going to pay down some of Luis Robert Jr.'s salary, because I believe Fangraphs actually has Vientos' season right now worth a value of minus $3 million. So technically, while you're going to get the club control, and he's 25 and all that type of stuff in context, on the flip side for value, Luis Robert Jr. still provides plenty more value in terms of he can play defense, run the bases, and hit lefties and hit for power. Vientos, he's been struggling really, really bad this year. I believe his average is at like 200 or no, 220 or something. So he obviously has a better average, but all the rest of the numbers, I think he only has like 6 home runs this year. So, you're really banking on getting him to work with Ryan Fuller to get himself back to what he was last year. Now, in terms of Hauser, Mooney pointed out the reason the Cubs would be interested in him is they did actually have him in the organization last year after he was cut by the Mets, and he also pitched for Craig Counsell when they were together in Milwaukee. This is what Mooney writes in The Athletic. Last summer, the Cubs quickly signed Hauser to a minor league deal after he was released by the Mets. By the end of August, the Cubs had released Hauser, who in an interview with The Athletic's Ken Rosenthal explained his turnaround. Hauser overhauled his mechanics at pitching WRX in Oklahoma City and changed his diet. He had been a positive contributor to multiple playoff teams in Milwaukee. Though he doesn't pile up strikeouts, he's keeping the ball on the ground and getting weak contact at exceptional rates. Quote, he is throwing harder, Counsell said. The velocity probably the big difference right now, end quote. Even if Hauser's performance is bound to regress, the Cubs could use a back-of-the-rotation starter for stability. And I actually wouldn't mind sending him to the north side. Maybe send another reliever so you can maximize more of what you can tap into the Cubs hitting prospects. But I'm all for tapping into the Cubs system. I mean, obviously you're not going to get Owen Casey, but it would be nice to, see if one of their promising bats that they have in their minor league system can help you out down the road. Well, speaking of Cubs and White Sox, the Cubs took round 2 of the Crosstown Series. Things looked great on Friday, but fell apart over the weekend. And one reason the White Sox keep asking players to play out of position, and let's discuss after the break. Ever wish managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Monarch Money has helped my wife and I stay on the same page when it comes to managing our finances. I love it because it's also helping me save up for retirement because, I would like to retire before I turn 75. It's great for helping me track my 401k and Roth IRA portfolios. My wife loves it because it makes budgeting so easy and less stressful. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so for the record, yes, I am a fan of Colson Montgomery playing third. My reasoning is simple. Billy Carlson is going to eventually move him off short. This year's first-round pick, I know it's going to be a couple of years before he's to the big leagues, but they're already, scouts are saying he had the best glove of the entire draft. Not a shortstop. The entire draft. Best fielder. And if he can make a few swing adjustments, there's talk of him being maybe just a step below Bobby Witt Jr. That is a stud. That is a dude. And he's going to stick at shortstop. His glove is just going to be better. So I'm advocating at this point, maybe just have a rotation at shortstop. I'm not saying completely get rid of Colson Montgomery ever playing shortstop ever again. But I'm fine with him getting reps at third during a lost season. However, I've said this before. When you get presented with new information, when you get presented with new context, you can sort of alter your position a little bit in terms of, maybe they should have just, I don't know, given him some reps at third base in the minor leagues where wins and losses really don't matter. I mean, obviously this year, the only reason why it's starting to evolve into, hey, caring about wins is number one, meatballism. I mean, yeah, I would love to see the White Sox take 2 of 3 from the Cubs, and they had a chance, this weekend. Number two, yes, you do want this young emerging core now to start to learn how to win. Not get used to, we're going to lose again, and it sounds like, they're still confident. But in the minor leagues, wins and losses do not matter at all. And if you're going to argue that they do, then you're probably just a fan of that minor league organization. Because player development is what matters. Getting those players to the big leagues, that's what matters. Not, hey, I mean, it's great that Birmingham won the Southern League last year. It is. It's nice. But at the same time, they're not going to hang a banner at Wright Field, although it wouldn't shock me. So that's why this organization keeps asking players to play out of position at the big league level. Can be a little frustrating when they don't give them the background in the minors. Because yes, there's the mitigating factor. As I just explained that, hey, hey Todd, I thought wins and losses don't matter. They don't. But at the same point, you kind of want the young core to start to get, used to winning and being in competitive games and actually coming through instead of losing. And also the context just looks terrible. As it's another sign that this franchise does not keep learning its lessons. It's repeating the sins of the past rebuild, like starting Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets in the outfield. And in the case of Montgomery, it's clear he is way behind at just the simple basics of third base. So that's why, maybe they should have anticipated, hey, we might need him to play third, and also maybe anticipate, hey, we like positional versatility here at the White Sox. Use some games in the Charlotte Knights to have him play some third base. It was a missed opportunity because he's only played 8 professional games in his professional life at third, at least according to Baseball Reference, and that was in the Arizona Fall League. And I believe I was listening to Saturday's radio broadcast as I was driving to dinner. I think it was Darren Jackson. He pointed out, a minor mistake that Colson made that maybe he wouldn't have. He had more reps. He makes a mistake on a Dansby Swanson grounder, hits a third. He's got Carson Kelly at second, a catcher, and Ian Happ on first. Swanson hits a grounder. Montgomery is, according to Jackson, in position to get Kelly out at third, and then maybe try to fire to first to get Swanson for the double play. Instead, he fires to second, probably instinctively because he's played a ton of shortstop. And then there's no chance for the second baseman to pivot and throw out the pretty decent running Swanson at first for the double play. So instead, it's a fielder's choice, and now you got a guy running in scoring position. He also had what turned out to be the game-deciding, factored into the game-deciding run yesterday. When they had Ian Happ in a rundown, heading to home, Happ returns back, tries to get to third, and he just bounces off of Colson Montgomery because Colson Montgomery is standing right in the base path. So Happ scores, and when Andrew Benintendi in the bottom of the frame in the eighth hits his 3-run homer, it's 5-4 instead of 4-4 maybe. And now we can argue all the live long day if Montgomery is allowed to block the base path, like some of you are arguing on social media or trying to point out. But still, maybe if he had gotten some reps in the minors, this could be avoided. Maybe also if they're properly running down. So maybe I'm also pointing this out is because if, Chris Getz loves positional versatility, maybe you might want to have a director of fielding. You already got a director of pitching, that makes sure that at least everybody's pitching in sort of the same way and developing their pitches. You got a director of hitting to make sure that there's a standard throughout the entire organization. Maybe you might want to get a director of fielding. Just saying. And also, if you're going to say, well, we're asking these young guys to do a lot, you love positional versatility. It seems to be one of the standards that you want to implement. So there's nothing wrong with asking these young kids. I know they got a lot on their plate, but add that to the standard. Hey, you might need to play different positions and be ready. And we're going to get you in at different positions. Think about it too. For those that are saying, well, you're changing. Guys, I was calling for Kyle Teal and Edgar Carroll to get reps at first and for Teal to even get reps in the outfield at Charlotte. Now, he did get some reps in practice. But again, practice and game action is way different. But no, we can't do that because they have to understand the nuances of catching, which, to be fair, is kind of a lot. But at the same time, you had both of them playing together with the Knights for a little bit, and only one of them can catch. So all I get, you got to have them probably in the meeting room after they're done. One of them's not catching. That's why you could have had them both. Now, and also too, you got the debate of should one of them be DHing while the other catches, and the organization is still resisting that. And I think that's where I'm also getting frustrated because they're still having these dogmatic ways when it's like you should be just experimenting right now because nothing is expected of you. And I also know there's some of you that feel like this team, why they're playing guys out of position is because they right now have no natural first baseman with Andrew Vaughn traded and Tim Elko on the IL. That's forced the shuffling. But, I'll say this. I'm not saying like I was right or that, but I've been calling for Miguel Vargas to play first in the offseason. And if you looked at his defensive metrics coming into the season, he was, had some decent numbers. Granted, I think it was like 50 innings at first base. And also remember, Vaughn was so bad you had to demote him. Like he could no longer be on the major league roster. And moving on from him was the best. And why he's thriving in Milwaukee is they're basically asking him to what he had to do in 2021 and 2022, and that's not carry the offense, not be a core guy. And also had Teal maybe gotten some actual first base game reps. You could maybe only ask Vargas to play first a few days a week instead of what seems like every day because Lenyn Sosa can't locate first base. And also Lenyn Sosa, this is also why you need a base running director because Lenyn Sosa's base running gaffe also cost them a run yesterday. His instincts are just so bad. But hopefully Montgomery's third base instincts continue to develop well. Well, it's Monday, so let's do a minor league Monday report and go over the White Sox getting another top 100 prospect, a few updates to their top 30 list per MLB Pipeline, and two top 10 prospects getting promotions with one singling. Maybe the White Sox will have another core piece up in 2026, and that is after the break. Today's episode and this hat is brought to you by Game Day Hue. Show you that sweet logo there. For White Sox fans like me, this one hits the mark. Game Day Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. And you know me, I love my hats since I got a big old bald spot. And as you can see, my hairline is thinning and this cap fits so comfortably. I love the clean look, and I love how I can still rock my White Sox colors without getting that look of disdain from those annoying Cubs fans. And it's not just hats. Check out this split shade golf glove. Made for the golf course, or the perfect gift for the fan who has everything. And right now you can get 15% off with the code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now it's the time to load up. Let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Hope you had a good weekend. Mine was, I took my daughter for her birthday week to the American Girl store in Chicago. So I was in Chicago for a little bit. Didn't obviously get to see the Cubs Sox games in person, but hey, it's always good to be in the city beautiful. So again, hopefully you had a good weekend. All right, so MLB Pipeline finally caught on and got a clue and moved Caleb Bonemer into their top 100 prospect list. He checks in at number 100 after Jacob Mizrowski graduated. 46 days in the show, I believe, is what gets you to graduated status. So Mizrowski passed that mark with the Brewers. So he's off the list, and now enter Caleb Bonemer. Now, Baseball America had the White Sox shortstop third baseman already in their top 100. And sometimes I think Pipeline is late to the show. However, Pipeline is free, and they still have some good people running their ratings too. Jim Callis, I think, does a good job, that type of stuff. So that's why I actually usually cite them more than others. But they still have their drawbacks. They can be a little bit late to the party, as I like to say. They also tend to really think the Dodger system is great. It's like, I don't know about that, but gives the White Sox now 5 top 100 prospects, although Colson Montgomery, who, by the way, I want to say this. I do love watching Colson Montgomery, and I do enjoy him, and I really like the ceiling. I've even said, and I don't bash him. Even if he's Paul DeYoung hitting 30 home runs a year, that'll be great. Obviously, you'd love to hit him, reaches Corey Seager's star-like ceiling that's projected. And again, I didn't say Corey Seager. The scouts did. That's on the scouting report. Okay? So I'm not bashing the kid for yesterday. Just merely pointing out that play was costly. That's all. And that's okay. It's okay. But Colson Montgomery will probably be graduating soon. And, that's why Pipeline has updated their top 30 prospects throughout the board. They usually do it around this time. And they've done it for the White Sox. So I'll get to that in a little bit. But the team had 2 major promotions this past week. In that 2023 first-round pick, Jacob Gonzalez, he's on his way to AAA. He already got in some games. Braden Montgomery, one of the team's top 100 prospects, he is getting the promotion to AA. That, I believe, was announced yesterday. So you must wonder if the White Sox are trying to push Braden along so that he is ready to debut next season. With the updated top 30 rankings, Braden is the team's number 2 prospect, and the top hitting prospect overall as Kyle Teel officially graduates. Montgomery will leave high A with a 260 average and a 793 OPS and 8 home runs. And it seems like the organization must have felt like 254 at-bats in Winston-Salem was enough. Now, 70 strikeouts, that's alarming because that's how much he had for the dash. But, you got to understand, you have analysts who think striking out is no big deal. That's usually the common theme now with the sabermetrics is as well. An out is an out, even though I completely disagree because a strikeout never puts the ball in play. When you put the ball in play, there's really only 2 times where I would say it's horrendously awful. It's either a completely, and that's if you have men on base. The first time it's completely horrendously awful is if you just hit a line drive shot to like short, especially in a contact play, that doubles up, or obviously you hit into a double play. But otherwise, you still have the possibility of an error. You still have the possibility of just anything potentially happening when the ball gets put in play to get some of the positive, results. There's always the potential for positive when the ball is put in play. When you strike out, there's none because the ball just doesn't go into play. So when I tend to focus on, though, if you have a lot of strikeouts for a hitter, is the power there? Can you live with it? Because if they can generate some instant offense or crush home, doubles or triples and that type of stuff, or, have a good runners with scoring position average, then you can live with strikeouts. And Braden had a 545 slug, 8 home runs, along with 17 doubles. So I think I can live with the case. But what you want him to do is, obviously, I think one of the reasons why they're also promoting him is you want him to now start seeing pitches that he will likely see in the majors, as more and more teams are using Double-A as their development ground for their major league pitching. So he's going to start to see what he might see in the big leagues. Although, again, they, for some reason, don't use the major league ball at Double-A, which they should. For Gonzalez, I just think this is kind of like when they promoted their top prospect, pitcher Noah Schultz, to Charlotte last month. I mean, Gonzalez has been in Birmingham for now almost a year. So unless you want him to buy a condo, it's time to move on. And it's going to be hard to gauge what he's going to be still at the major league level, because there's times where it's like, man, he looks like he at least, I think everybody, I'll say this, and James Fox had a tweet too. I think his ceiling is just a raised floor player. So that's what you want to aim for. And there are days where it's like, man, he could look like he's a 1.5, 2 F4 player. He does. He's shown that. Then there's days like, man, this guy might be Danny Mendick. Because he had a 244, 305, 369 slash line. Did have a solid June after switching to the torpedo bat, but man, his last 30 days, he is stunk. 207, 254, 289 slash line over the past 30 games. But again, how many more bats does he need at Double-A? At some point, you just got to give him the next challenge and see if things maybe click a little bit differently. In terms of the major updates to the team's top 30 prospects list per MLB Pipeline, the top 10 is Schultz 1, Montgomery 2, Braden Montgomery 2, Hagen Smith 3, Colson Montgomery 4, obviously for now. Bonemer is 5. He'll likely move up to 4 once Colson graduates. Pitcher Christian Opper, he's 6. Tanner McDougal 7. George Wolcott 8. Gonzalez 9. And Jairo Iriarte is at 10. Other notes, Samuel Zavala, he's back in the top 30. I think he got up to somewhere, I think he was in the top 10 at some point last year. I think he was 6 at one point. But had that terrible, season at Winston-Salem where he just cratered out. Obviously, he's having a much better season now, so he's bounced back. That's one of the pieces that they got in the Dylan Cease trade. Peyton Paulette, he's all the way up to number 14. And my only other critique is, if you got injured players out for the season, just remove them, as I want to see a list of actually active players. If they're hurt, and even if they're hurt, okay, if they're on a 7-day IL stint being short-term, they can still be on the list. But if they're just completely out for the season, it's kind of like, well, there's the false hope. Hey, you're not getting your number 11 prospect available at all, like in Mason Adams. So I would just say remove those guys, because you got Mason Adams at number 11, Blake Larson at number 17. He's out for the year with Tommy John surgery. Ron Kerala, he's out for the year with Tommy John surgery at number 19. Kai Bush at number 20. He's out for the year with Tommy John surgery. Aldrin Batista at number 22, I believe he's out with a forearm injury. And Nick McLean at number 24, outfielder. I believe they're all out for the year. So none of these guys are going to play this year. So just take them off the list until they're healed up. You can add them back. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow with some mailbag questions. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the latest trade rumors, the White Sox asking players to play out of position, and this week's Minor League Monday Report. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. And again, if you got mailbag questions for tomorrow's show, email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.